It's like clockwork. We've all seen this play out already a gazillion times. Here's the scene. A well-known writer makes a highly public split from their former publisher and boom, simultaneously announces a new subscription newsletter product. Then the Twitterati emerge, naysaying like naysayers do. Some common refrains include, the newsletter subscription model will only work for those who have done well in a traditional media model. Or, you'll only succeed if you have a pre-existing baked-in following. And, everyone is suddenly going to come down with mass subscription fatigue. Don't believe us? Do a search on Twitter for Substack and Famous, and you'll see all kinds of commentary like this. You've got Columbia Journalism Review's Matt Ingram asking, can it work for more people than just a handful? Can it work for more than the handful that would have done well in a traditional media model? Then there's media veteran Josh Sternberg saying, the people who are doing well on the platform already have a huge audience. What I'm saying is, this is more like trying to be a rock star. Most of us are in garage bands, summer session musicians, and only a select few become the biggest bands in the world. And the Washington Post's Jared Dicker adding that Substack is a celebrity creator business like Patreon and Cameo. They require an existing audience for near-term success. All are leveraging reputation from other platforms. The most successful are already famous. These people will have you believe that you can only do well if you have, say, tens of thousands of Twitter followers, or you have Vox Media on your resume, or you worked with Edward Snowden, or you overuse the phrase vampire squid. We say, fuck all that. We are the counter-argument to it all. How? We never worked in traditional media. We didn't have a pre-existing baked-in following. We basically had no Twitter presence. And here's the kicker. We're anonymous. That's right. It's pretty damn hard to, as Mr. Dicker said, leverage a reputation when nobody knows who the bloody hell you are. Those of you who are like us and don't have celebrity or a following to fall back on, listen up. If you have a good idea, if you can add value, if you have expertise that you can share that others might benefit from, and you're disciplined, tell all those naysayers to fuck right off. They're just mad because nobody will pay to read their exhaustingly negative hot takes. But what if you're your own biggest critic? What if you have a mini devil on your shoulder talking you out of every entrepreneurial idea you've ever had? We'll repeat. If you have a good idea, if you can add value, if you have expertise that you can share that others might benefit from, and you are disciplined, and yet you still have doubts, well, then tell yourself to fuck off. And get newslettering. What was our idea? Our value proposition and our expertise? And then how did we grow our newsletter? Let us tell you a bit about Petition. Petition is an anonymously written twice-weekly snarky and irreverent newsletter that covers distressed investing, bankruptcy, and restructuring. Sexy, right? To add some flash to that and expand our coverage universe, we decided that we wanted to focus on disruption from the vantage point of the disrupted. While Clayton Christensen, rest in peace, or Ben Thompson might cringe from the way we abuse the word disruption, the basic crux was that we wanted to highlight how today's innovations may lead to tomorrow's bankruptcies. We wanted to underscore that while celebrating the revolutionizing of Industry XYZ, we're all, as a society, neglecting those on the back end of that revolution. Make no mistake about it, the restructuring industry itself is a pretty niche space, a subset of corporate law and finance, but its reach is wide. And while it might not sound sexy, it actually kind of is. Think about the coverage universe from just the past year plus. In the utility sector, you've got PG&E. Global warming and widespread wildfires sank the over-indebted utility into bankruptcy, requiring a wholesale reassessment of the way electrical distribution will work in the nation's largest economic state. In manufacturing, there were Dean Foods and Borden Dairy Company. The rise of alternative dairy like almond, oat, and other processed to the hilt yet healthy milks and cheeses pummeled dairy incumbents. In media, the McClatchy Company. Well, media today, you know. The retail apocalypse. Pier 1, True Religion, J. Crew, Neiman Marcus, JCPenney, John Varvatos, All Saints, GNC, Brooks Brothers, Lucky Brand Dungarees, Sur La Table, Ascena Retail Group, Lord & Taylor, Men's Warehouse, Century 21, Guitar Center, Francesca's. Retail, and mall-based retail in particular, got fucking napalm by a perfect storm of Amazon, resale apps like Poshmark and Wish, direct-to-consumer digitally native vertical brands, changing consumer habits, burdensome private equity-placed leverage buyout debt, and more. Restaurants. Chuck E. Cheese, California Pizza Kitchen, the largest franchisee of Wendy's and Pizza Huts, Ruby Tuesday, Friendly's. Healthy eating trends, expanded food selection, and food delivery battered lesser quality restaurant chains, particularly in the casual dining segment. Fitness. Gold's Gym, 24-Hour Fitness, New York Sports Club, Yoga Works, In Shape. These are almost all a pure COVID story. Travel. Hertz. While some might argue that Uber and Lyft were siphoning off Hertz business, the company was nowhere near needing Chapter 11 prior to COVID. But no air travel equals no car rentals. While U.S. airlines got bailouts by way of grants and loans, foreign airlines weren't so lucky. Aeromexico, Latam Airlines, Avianca, and others all fell. Mining. The entire coal industry. MAGA are asses. Energy. The entire oil and gas and oil field services industry, onshore and off. Hundreds of oil and gas-related companies have filed for bankruptcy in the last 5 years. These are all the companies you've heard of. Then there are the ones you haven't, like VIP Cinema Holdings, Inc. In mid-February, before COVID reared its ugly head, the manufacturer of luxury seats for movie theaters filed for bankruptcy. Why? In its Chapter 11 filing, it cited the cascading effect of the continued proliferation of online streaming services and alternative viewing experiences, leading to declining movie attendance and a poor outlook sentiment for the overall U.S. movie theater industry. This put significant pressure on AMC Theaters, a key customer which stopped expanding and renovating existing locations. That meant decreased revenue for VIP. Netflix and chill? Hell no. This was Netflix and kill. Then there's Synveo Incorporated, a 100-year-old large paper manufacturer and printer that you likely, without even knowing it, interacted with. Among other things, it produces specialized envelopes used by the likes of J.P. Morgan Chase Bank and American Express to deliver credit card statements, manufactures point-of-sale roll receipts used in cash registers, and prints direct mailers that companies use to market to potential customers. Why did it file for bankruptcy? The company blamed new tech transforming the industry. It said, consumers increasingly use the internet and other electronic media to purchase goods and services, pay bills, and obtain electronic versions of printed materials. Moreover, advertisers increasingly use the internet and other electronic media for targeted campaigns directed at specific consumer segments rather than mail campaigns. You see where we're going with this? To put it simply, every single time you opted in for an electronic bank statement, frequented a small business powered by Square which emails you receipts, or placed an ad with Google or Facebook rather than using print, you were fucking Synveo. In some way, whether you noticed it or not, all of these bankruptcies and restructurings touch you. These are your gyms, your restaurants, your retail spots, your malls. You may know one of the hundreds of thousands of miners, servers, cashiers, or journalists who have lost their jobs because of all this. When speaking to restructuring professionals about these mounting trends, we were dismayed with what we were hearing. It was clear that a lot of awfully high-priced professionals were advising clients on the basis of what is, not what is coming. On the investment side, it was clear that analysts and portfolio managers were underwriting investments on the basis of what is, not what is coming. This was mind-boggling to us. That's a disservice to clients. That tunnel vision shortchanges investors. For example, we remember asking a high-profile banker about the rise of alternative energy in Texas, a state that is, unbeknownst to many, at the forefront of the alternative energy revolution. When asked whether exploration and production companies were taking into account lower demand into balance sheet sizing, we were practically laughed out of the room. He doesn't give a shit. He's collecting his fee regardless. Fast forward a few years, and while there are a number of reasons why oil and gas prices are where they are, we're now hearing talk of peak oil. Balance sheets that were sized when oil was trading at $130 per barrel don't work at $30 per barrel. Literally hundreds of companies had filed for bankruptcy. Not so funny now, is it? So we started writing about these issues. We set up a Squarespace site, a MailChimp account. We set up a Twitter account and a LinkedIn account. We joined some restructuring groups on LinkedIn. We literally started from nothing. And we just wrote. We posted articles, and slowly but surely people started finding us. And even better, they started forwarding us. Remember, we were anonymous. We didn't even have the benefit of seeding our content within our own network. Roughly 18 months later, in late 2017, we stumbled upon a Neiman Lab article about Substack. So we reached out to Hamish. Anonymously, of course. He initially thought we were a bunch of jokers. An anonymous publication about restructuring? We're pretty sure Hamish had no fucking clue what restructuring even was, and we could tell he wasn't exactly feeling the cloak and dagger vibe. At that point, We had 1,792 subscribers, and we were just shy of 200 Twitter followers. We still had no Facebook page. Shit, we still don't have a Facebook page. In other words, we were no Heather Cox Richardson or Casey Newton or Glenn Greenwald. But we knew we were offering something of value. And 18 months in, we were getting pretty damn tired of giving that value away for free. After all, isn't that one of the biggest reasons why media companies have failed over the years? Ultimately, Hamish agreed to let us into their private beta. Let's talk about the restructuring research and media space for a minute. The industry is covered by some news outlets, but not especially well. Bloomberg and the Wall Street Journal probably have the best coverage out of the mainstream media. No disrespect to those media stalwarts, but generally speaking, their coverage suffers from three main problems. One, the articles are written by journalists whose reporting is extremely dependent upon outside expertise and judgment. That makes it easy for savvy sources to layer in their interests. The content producers are not investors or lawyers who can immediately filter out the bullshit. Two, reporters switch beats every few years. Just when a talented journalist really gets to know the industry, the players, and the motivations, they cycle out to go cover interest rates and foreign exchange or some shit. And three, they're limited by word counts. You can't do a deep dive with word counts. In short, the incumbents were vulnerable from the flanks. And then there are a bunch of business-to-business research services that firms pay for and individuals don't have access to. They tend to be very dry, extremely technical. They don't editorialize or take a stance, and they are very, very expensive. If you, a non-industry interested party, wanted to know how the Toys R Us bankruptcy affected you, you were basically shit out of luck. And even if you did have access to those resources, they're so boring that they'd put you to sleep before you even got the answer you were looking for. Let's be clear. It helps that, at least 90% of the time, we actually know what the hell we're talking about. After all, we were the first to predict that Toys R Us was going to liquidate. While the Twitterverse was losing its mind in outrage, we very quickly concluded that a bankruptcy judge would, in fact, approve Hertz's nonsensical and predatory public equity raise on the basis of something called the business judgment rule. Sounds fake. It's not. We've highlighted a large number of companies that could, and eventually did, file for bankruptcy long in advance of the actual catalyst. You see where we're going with all this? We picked an underserved niche area where we could offer some very broad-based expertise, and then we went to market business to consumer rather than business to business in an effort to democratize this information. We also saw that this subject matter was largely treated in a highly technical fashion. We wondered, what would happen if we made it more accessible? If we could keep our readers informed by producing both educational and entertaining content? Could we take this technical content and boil it down into simpler terms? Would people respond to legal and financial stories littered with F-bombs, GIFs, and emojis? Would a natural tone, snarky and irreverent in the spirit of the hustle or the skim, work for a sophisticated audience of MBAs and JDs? We now have our answer. But what about discovery and growth? We're not going to lie to you. Discovery and growth are going to be a challenge for anybody, whether you're well-known or unknown. So what do? There's no one-size-fits-all, so we'll just tell you what's worked for us. First, as trite as it actually sounds, the best discovery and growth mechanism is your content. Plain and simple. Produce good content, hyper-targeted to the right audience, and eventually people will find you. It also helps to know your audience. One question we wrangled with early on was, given the crazy volume of hours our target audience puts in at work, how do we make sure these people open and read us? We guessed that sending out the newsletter on Sunday morning would be highly effective. It's the one day that professionals have a bit more control over their schedule. They could read us over coffee or, on the West Coast, before they even roll out of bed. Did it work? Hell yes. Our Sunday open rates are off the charts. If you don't send your content when people will open it, they won't read it. If they don't read it, they won't champion it. Pure and simple. Our content is irreverent and audacious. Our overall growth approach is consistent with our content. We're not shy about reaching out to our readership and seeking their help. By way of illustration, once we see that a law partner at a target firm, let's call him Johnny of LaDouche, and LaDouche LLP, signs up and engages with our content, we reach out to Johnny and ask him to help us get his colleagues on board. When we saw that an investment banking analyst, call her Harper Stern, was highly engaged, we emailed her like, "Hey girl, can you help us get Robert Spearing and Yasmin Yazdani on board?" More times than not, people were willing to spread the gospel. When students reach out, we ask them whether there are finance message boards or Slack channels at school that they can post us to and help get the word out. We use FOMO to our benefit, We like telling firms they're a notable absentee from our member ranks. If we get one firm on board as a group subscriber, we'll turn to their competitor and drill home how they're now at a competitive disadvantage. You get the idea. You don't get if you don't ask. If you don't sell, you won't grow. To simply say that the content alone will be enough is somewhat misleading. That's the start of it. So let us be 100% clear about the sales aspect of all this. First, get the fuck over it. Everyone has to sell. We're pretty sure that the president-elect of the United States had to spend the last year or so gallivanting around the United States to sell himself to the point of 300-plus electoral votes and 80 million individual votes. Everyone has to sell. If you can't handle that, you might want to reconsider newslettering. That, more than the fact that you aren't famous, ought to be your biggest hang-up. We're not going to sugarcoat it. One advantage you have over us, you're not anonymous, so you have no excuse not to pound the pavement. Trust us, even Casey Newton, Matt Iglesias, and Matt Taibbi are going to have to do some salesy shit if they want to maximize their revenue potential. A couple of other points before we conclude. First, pivot quickly. The beauty of being an independent publisher is that you can be nimble and test different things to see what works. Once we started getting a lot of group subscriber inquiries, we doubled our efforts there to help juice subscriber numbers and revenue, and we priced accordingly. Speaking of pricing. Pricing is hard. We're not going to sugarcoat that either. It took us a while to figure it out. We initially priced ourselves too cheaply. Why? We were afraid. We feared people wouldn't pay, especially after getting our content for free for so long. We were wrong, and we shortchanged ourselves. Once we realized people would pay, we just kept raising our price until we reached what seemed like equilibrium. We didn't have the benefit of being able to survey readers about price points. Again, anonymity. You don't have that crutch. Do some research and, if in doubt, err on the side of too much rather than too little. Some might disagree with us on this point, but that is our view. It still pains us a lot to see those early birds getting our sweat equity at way below market value. Way below. Learn to say no. Do not cheapen your offering with hefty discounts. Over the holidays, we noticed a few Substackers offering to 33 to 50% off promos. For fuck's sake, don't do that. If you don't value your own time and effort, why would anybody else? Finally, always think about your offering through the lens of business. Focus on revenue. Don't be afraid to be a bit coercive to get free subscribers over the fence. Do content previews only. Shit, cut off a content block in the middle of a sentence saying you need to be a paying subscriber to continue reading on if you have to. Take a break from free editions for a month. Do a multi-part series spread out over free/paid editions so that free subscribers only get bits and pieces rather than the full picture. If they're not paying, you don't owe them anything. Do marketing emails to your unpaid list. Boot people off who are oversharing paywalled content. If you're fully embracing the subscription model, the total number of subscribers is vanity. What matters is paid subscribers. So where has all this gotten us? Our subscriber list is now in the double-digit thousands, multiple times larger than when we first spoke to Hamish. We've converted around 20% of our readers to paid. We now have over 6,000 Twitter followers. We accomplished all this despite lacking the profile the naysayers said was required to succeed. Who knows? Maybe we're just the one exception to the rule, but we highly, highly doubt it. So anytime someone says you need to be pre-established and have a baked-in audience, just think about Petition, the anonymous newsletter that started from scratch. Brush them off and get your ass newslettering. Thanks for listening. Please follow us at our @Petition on Twitter and sign up for our newsletter at petition.substack.com.